We're going to wrap up Chapter 4 in Zybooks by looking at the last 3 units. I've marked the section on binary numbers and these two programming problems as optionals. We're going to do a different lab exercise than these. And the information on binary numbers is somewhat interesting, but is not required for programming. So I'm going to leave that as an optional text. But if you ever wondered how numbers are converted into binary format, that's a good introduction. Okay, so let's go on to 4.4. We're going to talk about different data types and eventually talk about random numbers. So one of our problems we run into with integers is there is in computers a largest integer. The math folks would not like to hear that, but in computers we have limits to how big numbers are. So if you declare an int variable and set it to a number greater than about 2 billion, we run into some issues. And this does result is because of the way we store this in binary form. So if we have a number like this, a decimal number like this, it requires a lot of bits. This is how we write it in binary format. And if we add 1 to it, we can get an integer value. And we actually see as we add values to integers, eventually they'll roll over and the very large integers will become very large negative integers. So we get this integer overflow occurring. So we just have to watch out how many, the size of our integers and not expect integers to be too large, particularly with into the billions of digits. So this just talks about some of the overflow issues with integers. Now there are some ways around this, and we're going to go to 4.5 to talk about that. So generally in this class we will use two data types, ints for integers and doubles for double point numbers. But there are other ones, so I'm just going to go over those real quickly. So for decimal numbers there are actually 4 different types, a byte, a short, an int, and a long, and we'll generally use the int type, and that'll store anything from minus 2 billion to plus 2 billion, which is good for most things that we want. But if we're storing larger integers, there is a long value, which will go to almost 9 quadrillion. I don't know. I forget how many, but a very large number to another very large number, negative and positive. So if you're storing other numbers, so like the national debt of the United States or something like that, you might have to use a long variable for that integer. Now, short and bytes are sometimes used when memory is very constrained. So sometimes if you program a very small device like a microprocessor or maybe a cell phone, sometimes we used to use these. But today memory is so available, we rarely use bytes or shorts. We almost always will use ints. And then every once in a while, if we need to, we'll use these longs. So we do have to watch conversions between these sometimes, and we have to make sure we convert from the different types. Similarly, for floating point numbers, we'll generally use doubles. There is a value called float, which is a smaller version of this. But again, most of the work we'll use doubles, and by default, Java expects us to use doubles for decimal numbers. So if we just write out a constant like 1.4, Java will think it's a double for us. But just be aware that there's also this float type that you will see sometimes. And they talk about some overflow issues with these types also. Okay, let's go on to the last part of this lesson is on random numbers. So we saw there are some ways of generating random numbers. So we're going to look at a random number generator. So while it works is we have to declare a random number generator, and then we can grab random integers or other random numbers from this. So to do this, when we're going to generate some random numbers, we have to do this call. Sorry, my other video just got uploaded to YouTube for this class, and that's popped up here. Okay, back here. So to do a random number generator, first thing you have to do is declare the generator. So that's of type random. You say random, and you give it some name. Often we call it random generator, or random gen, or just rand, or something like that. And then we have to instantiate the object. We say new random, and the constructor takes no argument. So this creates the random number generator. Now, this is not defined in Java by default, so we have to make sure we include or import java.util.random so that it knows where to find this random. So if you put this in your code and it says random not found, it means you just haven't done this import. So make sure you do that. Now, once you have this random number generator, whatever it's called, you can use that and you can call nextInt to get an integer. So if we say randgen, the random number generator, and we can say next int, and we give it some number, like some max value, like 6, this will return a number between 0 and 1 less than this. So it'll return either 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there are 6 numbers there, but they start at 0. Now if we want to simulate a dice rolling, dice values are 1 through 6. So what we do is we grab this number, which is 0 through 5, and we add 1 to it, and that'll give us a number 1 through 6. So a good way of thinking of it is that if you write a value like this, this plus is the starting, the lowest number you'll get. So this means we'll start at 1, and then this will be the number of numbers you can get. So we'll go from 1 to 6 inclusive. So we use this a lot to generate random numbers between 1 and 6. If we wanted a random number between 1 and 100, we'd do 100 here, and we'd still add 1. So because if we said 100 here, that'll give us a random number between 0 and 99, always 1 less than this value. And then by adding 1 to it, we'll get a number between 1 and 100. So it's a little bit of math to get this to work, but it's a nice process. It's not too hard to work with. And again, it walks you through how this works and shows you some things. So what are the values that you could get for some of these different random number generators. Now, one thing you'll see down in the challenge activities, if you choose that, is there's another method you can call, and that's set seed. When you create a random number generator, you can specify a seed, or when you can call it here and specify a seed. So by default, the random number generator starts at a random number in its huge random number sequence. If you say set seed, that will go to that spot in a list of random numbers and give you those random numbers over and over again. So you have to, generally we don't want to do a set seed, because that'll make our program always have the same set of random numbers again and again. There are some other random number generator things. If I go look in the random documentation for the Java class, again, these are the two constructors we looked at. Another one you'll see is just, like we said, we saw nextInt, or nextInt where we specify an upper limit, and this is what we use a lot. But there's also a next double. So a next double will return a number between 0 and 1. And you can actually use this value to do generate lots of other random numbers and random distributions. So next double is used sometimes also. Okay, so that kind of wraps up the random number generator and wraps up this chapter 4 stuff.